This is the Blackout Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Blackout Podcast, where I get to talk to amazing people that do amazing things. And today I have someone I respect, someone that I'm learning a lot from, Iain MacLeod. Thanks and welcome to the podcast today.
Thanks for having me. I don't know if I'm amazing, but I'm happy to be here. So.
I know. Well, first off, I remember coming to AFCOOP because I made a film on the phone, and then someone was like, "Oh, you need to go to this AFCOOP place," and I remember coming in, and then I found out about the script writing thing. And I don't know why everyone celebrates the actor and the director, but it all starts with the fucking script.
Yes, I like what you're saying.
It does.
I like where your head's at.
No, really. So I remember taking a screen writing workshop with you. I was like, holy shit. And I've taken that thing like 3 or 4 times now. And the next one you do, I'm going to probably take it.
I was kind of, when you were there, I thought, because you were taking notes on your phone, but I didn't realize you were taking notes. I thought you were just texting somebody. So I'm like, this dude, man, I've lost him. But then you came back a second and a third time, like, I don't understand. He seems to be texting all the time, but he keeps coming back. Maybe, I don't know, I'm old, so maybe there's something I don't understand, but yeah, no, I'm glad you enjoy it.
Yeah, no, I know. There's this, I think it was the first or the second one, where you put a photo of like I think it was a street in England.
Okay, yeah.
And then it's
Manchester,
like and it's this crazy photo, and then we have to kind of come up with people's story. I love that exercise.
That's not my original idea. Like I stole that. Like I think that's there are different people who've used that idea of like you start trying to build a story out of a photo, what's going on, and it's just kind of a good kind of way to get people thinking about story. And I actually used to do I've taught a lot of screenwriting workshops, and I used to kind of do a lot more kind of information dumping, this is the 3-act structure, this is that. And now I kind of feel like I'm a little scared to do this, but I just want to spend the whole workshop just making a story up with the people in the class, because I think that's really how you learn to write, is by writing. So
yeah, I agree. So tell me a bit about your background.
Well, I grew up mostly in New Glasgow in Pictou County in Nova Scotia. We moved around a little bit, but it was mostly there. And my dad was a minister, so I kind of had a religious upbringing. And, it was New Glasgow is a very kind of working class community. I would say my family was pretty solidly middle class, but it was a working class environment and very Scottish. Certainly not exclusively Scottish, but there was that cultural kind of influence in the community, and I watched TV a lot when I was a kid, and I'm a huge soccer fan. I've got my West Ham hat on, which seemed to excite you. So, and I was when I was a kid, I don't know. I suppose this is probably something to do with colonialism, but I was a real Anglophile when I was a kid. And I used to love watching British films and TV, and so yeah. But I think I had a pretty. I grew up in the '80s, a pretty sort of in some ways typical small town Nova Scotia kind of upbringing, and because of the religious thing, and I think also because of the fact I grew up in a very Scottish area. I was very aware of that too, and those were big influences, I'd say.
Okay. And then how did film start?
Well, like I said, I watched a lot of TV, so I think that was probably an influence. But for me, it really started when I was in grade 12. At the end of grade 12, I was taking a sociology class, and there was a group presentation. And actually, it's funny because I know a lot of people who went to school in other countries, and they all kind of say that, like in Canadian schools, there's always a big focus on presentation. And in a lot of other countries, that isn't the case. I actually did not find that to be the way, and maybe it's just, again, because of my age, but there were very few presentations in school. But this was, and maybe this is partly why I remember it so much, but this was a pretty big one. There was a sort of it was a group, and we had to present to the class. And so the group I was in decided, let's do a video as part of this. And this was like 1990, it was spring of 1990. And video cameras they'd been around for a little while, but they weren't most people didn't have them. So my friends and I rented a video camera from a stereo store. And so like all these words are things that nobody even knows what they are. And then we shot this video. It was about immigration. We had to pick a social topic. It was sociology class.
Okay.
And so we interviewed a friend of mine who was from Poland, and we somehow got an interview with the local immigration officer. And then we stole this news clip from CBC, and then we edited with 2 VCRs, and the titles were like white paper on a white table that we pulled along with the credits. And then we also put in like lots of just music that we like too, like punk music and whatever, and which didn't fit, but was kind of part of its charm.
Yeah.
And I had so much fun. That was the most fun I'd ever had, certainly in school, but maybe just in life.
Oh, wow.
And so it really planted this seed of like film is something that's fun to do. And I think like I knew that people made films, obviously, but growing up in a small town in Nova Scotia at that time, before the internet, it was just something like I wouldn't even know how to begin to even think about doing that, let alone doing it. And so I just kind of kept making videos with my friends. And I watched a lot of TV, I watched a lot of movies. And slowly over time, it became this idea that maybe this is something I could do. And so that's probably where it started. And it kind of grew from there.
And do you remember the title of this immigration film you guys made?
No, I don't. I wish I did, and I don't have it. Like I have stuff we had the camera for the whole weekend, so we might as well do something else. So we did this ridiculous kind of sort of horror spoof in the backyard of one of my friends, and I think we still have that somewhere, but I don't have the immigration thing, and it just kills me. Like that's one of my biggest.
Wait, like wouldn't your school still have it?
Oh God, no, they don't. They tore it down. I don't think they kept stuff 2 weeks after we were out of there.
Shit.
No, I don't think they have it. I think, and then the other thing is too, because it's like video costs a lot of money. It's not like we were doing 2 copies, right? Like that was $5 or something. So no, I think there was only ever 1 copy, and I don't know. It was sort of lost to the.
And so, did you go straight to a film school or like a film course?
No, because I wasn't, by that time I'd already applied to university.
To study what?
Well, I went to King's, and the first year at King's is called the Foundation Year Program, and you do sort of like it's a crash course in Western civilization. You don't do individual electives so much. But it was, I wasn't really ready for university, and there were a lot of rich kids from Toronto there. And so after a couple months, I dropped out and, had a dead-end job in a video warehouse in New Glasgow. I moved back home.
Video warehouse?
Yeah, again, that's something that doesn't even, what even is that?
So what do you do?
There was a company that was owned by Sobeys, actually. It was called Downey's Video. And what we did, we had the contract to distribute videos to the Sobeys stores used to have videos.
Oh.
And then all the convenience stores used to have videos, like the Needs. And then there were also like independent sort of like corner shops that would have videos. And so the bigger stores would deal directly with the distributors like Warner Brothers or whatever in Montreal or Toronto. But we were kind of these like middlemen, if you will, that we dealt with a lot of the local kind of places plus Sobeys. And so my job, I was called a movie trader. And I would get a printout on a computer. They did have computers, and I would get this printout, and it would be like.
But was it a dot matrix print?
Yeah. You had to rip the. But anyway, it was so I get this printout of all the movies a particular video store had in the last year, and I had to go to the shelves and get 60 movies they hadn't had. So the first like 30 or 40 were really easy to find. But then you would get into this thing where it was like harder to find titles.
Was it arranged alphabetically?
No, they had like I don't remember exactly. It was like a number code that they had.
Okay.
But so the last sort of 10 or 15 would be really hard to find. So I'd send them like Japanese movies, and then I'd write a little card in. I got in trouble for this. Thank you for supporting Japanese cinema. And like, so you'd have some, like corner store on the South Shore somewhere, and they'd be complaining about the movies. So it was, anyway. So I did that. And then I had a couple of I worked in a funeral home at one point. And
What?
Yeah.
How is that experience? Like, what were you doing there?
I was just like, it was a summer kind of job.
Okay.
And again, I got it, I guess, because my dad was a minister and knew so it was just a summer job. So I was basically just helping out so that everybody could take their 2 weeks holiday over the course of the summer. They'd sort of rotate.
Yeah.
And so a lot of what I was doing was I might be answering the phone at night, or I'd be vacuuming or sweeping up or opening the door for people at wakes, that kind of thing. So I did that. I just did that just for the summer.
Okay.
And then I had a few other jobs. And then eventually I decided, you know what, I'm not really. Oh, and there were also a couple failed attempts at moving to England when I was 20.
Moving what? Oh, because you loved England.
Yeah, and I got there and I realized, oh, this is really hard and I don't know anyone and what am I doing? And I bailed.
How was the weather though?
How is the weather in England?
Yeah.
Well, it's better than here.
What?
Well, it doesn't snow, so.
Oh.
But I think it probably rains more though.
Yeah, exactly. Because everyone complains about the rain.
Yeah, it is Halifax.
Yeah,
yeah, so I tried that, didn't really work out, and I realized at that point it was just before I was 21. I'm like, I need to go back to school.
So wait, when you're in England, like, was that when West Ham started?
No, I became a West Ham fan when I was like about 12 or 13.
Oh wait, so before this?
Yeah.
Oh Jesus! Of all the teams.
Yeah. I don't know why. I just randomly picked them. They were like in Shoot magazine or Match magazine or one of those magazines. That's something else from the past. And you're too kind. And so I decided I had to go back to school. And again, because this was right before the internet, information was harder to get. You couldn't just go online and find stuff out. So I actually missed. I went to York and I was going to do a film degree. But the film deadline was earlier than the general deadline. So I missed it. So I went into the English stream. And then I was going to switch in my second year. But because I kind of did the math and I realized I don't know if they still do this or not, but at the time in Ontario, you could do a 3-year degree. And so I did the math and I realized that in the summer when I came home, I could do classes at St. F.X. and I could do a 3-year degree at York in 2 years. So I just stayed in English. I took 1 or 2 kind of film theory classes, but that I did an English degree. And then when I got out of school, I moved back to Nova Scotia, and I somehow convinced my mother to loan me money. She didn't tell my dad how much, to loan me money to make a film. And that was my first film.
Did you have the idea for the film before you asked her for the money?
Yeah, it was the film I made. I sort of say it was about Viola Desmond, but it kind of really wasn't. It was about the night she was arrested. And for those who don't know, although hopefully most people do, and her story is more and more sort of well known, and she's on the $10 bill now.
Yeah. Oh God. That I suck at saving, but I think having her on the thing is making me saving now, like into saving now, because whenever I get a term book with her, I just keep it. So now I'm having a stash somewhere.
Yeah, so I didn't, and I grew up in the town that she was. So basically, it was in November 1946. There was an African Nova Scotian businesswoman from Halifax, Viola Desmond, who went to New Glasgow, and her car broke down, and she wanted to sort of kill some time, really, and so she went to the Roseland Cinema. And at the time, it was racially segregated, and she didn't know that because in Nova Scotia at the time, it was there wasn't a universal kind of segregation policy, from what I understand anyway. So she was sold, without realizing, a ticket to the balcony, which was where African Nova Scotians were, quote unquote, supposed to sit. And she went downstairs and was asked to leave. Because the sort of explanation was that, because you only paid for it. So she said, well, I'll pay the difference. And of course, that wasn't what the issue was. And sort of it escalated. The theater manager came. the cops came. She actually spent the night in jail, and was in the end, the charge was defrauding the government 1 cent, because that was the difference in the amusement tax, right? So it's this very, and she appealed and lost in a high court, and so it's this very famous story in Canadian civil rights history. And so I didn't, and I had gone to that movie. Like, that's the movie theater where I saw La Bamba in, right? Like, it was, and I didn't know this story until like 1993, 1994 at York in Toronto in the student newspaper during, which at the time was called Black History Month, reading about this story and going, oh my God, this is where I grew up. I didn't even know this. And so that story was in my mind, and I still don't really have a clue, but I especially didn't then. But even then, somehow I knew it wasn't my place to tell her story. So I wrote this story that happened on the night of her arrest, and it's sort of about the white New Glasgow's response to it. And then there's this secret interracial relationship that's kind of the way in. And it's not a great movie, to be honest. Like, it's very
okay, but do you know what did you call it?
It was called, here's a piece of advice, by the way. It's called November 1946. Do not ever, 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 ever name a movie a date. It's just like, it's April 1973. What? Like, nobody ever remembered. It was a disaster. I thought he was being really clever. Yeats had written a number of poems called things like Ireland in April 1913, that kind of thing. And so I thought, look how clever I'm being. But nobody appreciated it. So anyway, so that was really my film school, because it was basically it was an hour long.
What?
Yeah, and I had no.
How much money did you have?
It was. I don't know if I should admit.
And how long did you shoot it for?
It was 48 minutes long. We shot over, I think it was 15 days.
Holy smokes.
It was really. It was meant to be 3 weekends. And it turned into 6. And I had no idea what I was doing. There's no AD. I didn't even know what that was.
Yeah.
And so I did it. I scheduled it all and arranged it all myself. And I thought I was being smart by having this 29-minute sort of centerpiece set in a diner in the middle of film. But it's like basically what I realized after, and not that long after either, unfortunately, was, this is a play. I just filmed a play. And so, but we shot in this sort of cafe diner in Pictou, and it closed at 6:00 on Saturday night, and it opened on 6:00 Monday morning. So what I should have done, what I should have done was given them a bunch of money to close for a couple more days and just shoot it out in the day, and put like paper in the window, or sort of dark, and keep the light from coming in. But I stupidly thought, I know what I'll do. I'll shoot all night Saturday, and I'll shoot all night Sunday, and everybody was really messed up, and it just became this nightmare doing. I think it was the first 3 weekends we were at that location, and it was just like, it was a long, drawn out, not always fun sort of experience.
Yeah, well, I guess but it makes a great film school, though, because you learned a ton from that experience.
Everything I really learned, or most of the most important things I learned, I think I learned on that film and that experience. And like, I had I cast my grade 2 teacher as one of the actors, and he was, I don't mean this in a critical way, but it just kind of wasn't working out with his performance during rehearsals, and I actually fired him. And so there are great stories that kind of come, there's also the racist makeup guy, like there's God. Like, it was kind of a master class in not only how not to make a film, but how, like, not to approach a difficult subject, sort of centered on race as a sort of a well-intentioned white liberal, whatever, like there were a lot of things I did wrong. So
okay, and then after that experience, you learned all these things. How long before you made another film?
It was a year.
Oh, what was the next one?
The next one was called CFA. It was a mockumentary about folk art.
So what does CFA mean?
Well, CFA, it stood for a couple things. So it stands for Come From Away.
Oh.
But it also stood for the initials of the main character, who was like this American folk art enthusiast. And it was a mockumentary, and it was a half hour. So the first 4 films I made, there was an hour and 2 half hours.
Gosh.
And none of these lengths sell.
Yeah.
Nobody buys those. Film festivals don't program them, and I didn't know that. So I made all this kind of. I should have made. Even when it's funny, even when the first film, November 1946, played at Wormwoods in the just up the street in the film festival in 1996, I remember my dad saying, who doesn't know anything about the film industry. There was a 5-minute film that was also in that same program, and he said, you probably should have done like a 5-minute. And of course he was right. Yeah, because a lot of the lessons I learned on my 48-minute film, or I shouldn't say but the 48-minute film, I could have learned those on a 5-minute film too.
True.
Right? So.
Yeah, true.
Oh, and you asked me what it was. It was shot on 16.
Oh.
And I had which is why it cost so much. I had this ridiculous idea in my mind that. Because I wanted to shoot on 16, and in fairness, at the time, video looked a lot colder than digital does now, but it was black and white, and so we shot on 16 and then just dumped it onto beta and edited on video. So I remember, I won't tell you how much the whole thing cost, but I will tell, because my mother might watch this at some point, I don't know, but it was, I think the bill to Magnetic North in Toronto was $8,800.
Holy
for
smokes.
All they did was, not all, but they transferred the film after it had been at the lab onto beta, and we even supplied the tapes.
What?
And they transferred it onto beta, and then they synced everything, and that was the $8,800. I can't say it because it's still painful. $8,800. Yeah.
That is a lot of money.
Yes, it is. Yeah. And again, because there was no budget and because I hadn't planned any of this, it was just
How did you pay your actors though? Like, did you pay them for the day, or was it for the whole project?
Yeah, it was per day. I don't think it was that much. And we actually had the training programs with ACTRA were sort of still in their infancy. But we did have one of the performers was a Halifax theater legend who's no longer with us, David Renton, who was in Neptune's first season in 1963 and was this kind of, at the time he was in his 60s, and he graciously agreed to be in the film and got paid way less than he should have, and was just a real trooper and a
man. You should have I guess just the more you say about this film, the more you sound like you were a great producer. That's what you should be doing, because getting such a person on your film.
Yeah, although he was, I don't know. I think he maybe just felt sorry for me. It was more, he was sort of like, okay. And it's, I mean, the story too, it's a really important story.
Yeah,
I probably wasn't the person to tell it. And I was certainly in over my head. But I think at the time, he wanted to get more, at that time he was a member at AFCOOP, and he wanted to get more involved in the community. And I remember when I first met him, actually, it was during Salter Street, which is DHX, which I think they've changed the name again, had this show called Lex, which was this sci-fi show. And there used to be, this is how old I am, which I've mentioned 4 times now, but there used to be a Volvo factory in Halifax, but I think they just assembled stuff that came from Sweden. And then that had been empty for a while, and then they were shooting, there weren't sound stages at the time, so they'd sort of improvised a sound stage in there. So I think the first time I met David Renton was on this, he was dressed as like an outer space wizard, and I went to meet him on set, and I passed Rutger Hauer going through the door, because he was in that episode, and I didn't even recognize him. I wasn't really a genre sort of person. And then my friend who was with me got really nervous, and he was like, "Hello, Mr. Hauer," and then Rutger Hauer was like, "Hi," and then he just kept going. So that's not really much of a story, but yeah. So
okay, and then when did you start writing? Like, you made all these movies. Was there a gap between that and actually writing for other people?
No. Well, what happened was I made 4 movies, kind of one after the other, in the late 90s, and I had a plot. And then sort of in the middle of that, I got my first TV job writing on Street Sense. So it was a CBC show it was kind of like a youth show that focused on consumerism and stuff, teaching kids how to save money and whatever. But there were sketches in it that did this. So I was one of the people who wrote the sketches. So I did a season there that was in 99, and I actually made 2 movies in 99. And so like I was really starting to make more stuff. It was getting into festivals and then I had applied to the Canadian Film Centre in Toronto 3 years in a row as a director, and I didn't get in. And the last time I got shortlisted and I had an interview and I didn't get in. And so I got in touch with them and I said, I'm just wondering if you have any feedback. And they said, you're not a director, which, is not so easy to hear. You are a writer. Oh. So there's like a silver lining. It's like, oh, well, I'm not a director, I guess, but apparently I'm a writer. And so I applied as a writer. And
Did they give you any reason for how they came to that conclusion?
No.
Oh, okay.
Even years later, there was no. And then eventually I realized, oh, maybe they were wrong. And maybe they weren't. I don't know. But so I applied as a writer and I got in and I went. And so I did a program there that they don't have anymore. They rolled into another program, but called the Professional Screenwriting Program.
How long was it for?
That one was just 3 months. Most of their programs are just a few months. Oh. And so usually what would happen would be, it's kind of like a film finishing school in a way. Oh, okay. And even though it's modeled on AFI in the States, it's really, a short-term kind of intensive, like you at AFI, I think you get an MFA now, like it's a degree granting kind of. But so I went there. And then, so again, I'm thinking, oh, I'm a writer, I'm not a director. And then almost immediately after finishing, I got an agent and I got a job on a show I was on for 6 years.
What show?
Trailer Park Boys.
Yeah. How was that? How was that one?
It was really, I look back and it was a great experience, but I was terrified the whole time I was there. Why? Because I started writing, or I was story editor, in season 2. So the original show was 7 years. So I was there from season 2 to season 7. But I had briefly in season 1 for the first 2 days done continuity, which was a ridiculous thing to do on that show, particularly in the first year.
Yeah.
And there was at the time the province, which if you know anything about film is a ridiculous idea, but they had this scheme where if you had worked in one area of the industry, you could get training in another area, which is, anybody who knows film knows it's about specialization. So you don't really do that. But I somehow got into this and I was supposed to be trained to be a continuity person, but there was no training. It was just like, okay, here's your clipboard. This is when your call time is, and it's like, well, okay. And then Trailer Park Boys, of course, especially in that first year, it was just like, okay, now we're going to do a scene at the side of the street. And it's like, well, what number is this? It's not in the script. And different people are like, figure it out. So at the end of day 2, they called me in, the producers, and they're like, it's not really your fault, but it's not really working out. Yeah. Would you like a part-time office job instead? And my pride was really hurt. This was before I went to the Film Center. Okay. And my pride was really hurt. And I said no, but I didn't freak out or I wasn't rude or anything. And then in the meantime, I went, and actually I forgot this part. So that was the summer of 2000, and I went to the Film Center in the winter of 2001. And that fall, I didn't get brought back to Street Sense because now all the secrets are coming out. Nobody really cares, I guess. But so Street Sense had hidden the writers who were writing sketch from the Writers Guild. And the Writers Guild found out. And then so they restructured the whole way the show was made. So I didn't have a job. And so I was a PA.
Well, because you had to be a member of the guild to write
you don't have to be a member, but you have to be paid the union rate, right? Oh, okay. So, and they didn't have it in the budget, so
Gotcha.
So I was a PA on a dock that fall, and I was broke a lot, and so then, even though I was broke and my life was kind of falling apart, I thought, well, why don't I try to make a feature film for $1,000? And so,
how long was this film?
Oh, well, it didn't get made, so in theory, 85 minutes. But we shot for 3 days.
Oh, wow.
It was a paintball thriller set in the woods, and it was called Kill Country, which is a great title.
It is, actually.
Yeah, and it was a great script. I wrote it with my friend Ian Johnson, who'd also written on Street Sense, and it was so we went and we started shooting, and it was early December, and we were gambling that the weather would hold.
Oh, fuck.
And it didn't. There was a blizzard. We got shut down. It was just a nightmare.
Yeah.
So we abandoned this project. And I think I was at my friend who was involved in the making of that film, and who's sadly he's no longer with us. I was at his grandmother's house, and she's still alive. At the time, she was in her 80s. And we were watching Jeopardy, and I'd thrown out my back making this movie, and this woman who was in her 80s was kind of taking care of me, and I was in my 20s still. And so she gave me this electric blanket, and I was just sort of like this and almost in tears watching Jeopardy with her. And it was at that time when this film just fell apart that I had my interview with the Film Center and got in. And then so it was like, oh, I guess I'm not a director, I'm a writer. So then I got on Trailer Park Boys right away. I'm not answering a question. But anyway, so because I had done continuity and kind of been fired, but kind of not, when they asked me to be on Trailer Park Boys the next year in the story department, I had that in my mind. And I actually had that in my mind for the whole 6 years. And I thought, I'm going to be fired at any moment. So even though it was, in one way, I really enjoyed it, and it was a lot of fun. And I feel like I can say this because I didn't create the show. I think it was a great show. But I was always scared of being fired. So I never totally relaxed. And yeah, so that's, and then I didn't really make my own stuff during those 6 years, and I was getting paid okay, and I was, worked half the year, and I thought life was pretty good. And then the show ended, and it never occurred to me that there wouldn't be something to replace it. I mean, I knew the show wouldn't last forever, but I thought I'll just bounce on to something else. And if I thought about it at all, I thought, oh, I hope I like that other show that I get. But it just kind of, because partway through Trailer Park Boys, I moved to New Glasgow. I think that was this ridiculous idea I had, and so I moved back down there. So not only was I not in Toronto, I wasn't even in Halifax. So really, if you're getting TV work, you need to be in Toronto hustling, and I wasn't doing that, and I just assumed it would all work out.
Where was the Trailer Park writers' room? In Halifax?
Yeah, it was in Halifax.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
And we bounced, the last season we were in Rob Wells' garage in Dartmouth. Like, I was the only one who didn't smoke.
Oh my
and
God.
We're in this garage, and
shoot.
they're smoking, and it's just, yeah. And there were a lot of it was not only was the content of the show unconventional, the way it was made was unconventional. It was very different from the way most TV shows, story departments are run. And so a lot of it was just sort of trying to hang on and not, But yeah, so after the show, nothing really replaced it. And then slowly I started making a living again with features that were in development. But I wasn't really making my own stuff. And then sort of a few years after Trailer Park Boys, I moved back to Toronto to try to see if I still had a career. And I was there for about half of 2012. And, trying to hustle and get some stuff going. And it just never really took off. I would, over the years, get these occasional consulting gigs on shows and stuff, but nothing really kind of went anywhere. And so I came back to Halifax and realized this is where I want to be. And then said, I haven't, so this is like 2013 maybe. I thought, I used to love making movies. And I haven't done that in like 10 years. And because I love the Canadian Film Center. I'm really glad I went there. I'm grateful for it. But because one or two people decide that a 27-year-old is this thing, not that thing, I was not making movies. So I said, I'm going to start making stuff again. So I started making my own things. And it doesn't do any good to dwell on it, but I do wish that I'd, made that move earlier. So. That was a very long answer.
What's the first thing you made in that period?
Oh God! If I have to say what the first thing is, this is another disaster. It was a movie it was called Body Language.
Oh, okay.
And it was it was basically a comedy about a couple who break up through charades. And it actually wasn't bad, but I sent the rough cut to Finn, and it didn't get in.
Yeah.
And then I kind of, because it was the first thing after a long time, I'm like, oh, maybe it's no good. And I actually think it's
was
okay.
Was there any dialogue inside, or was just...
No, there's dialogue.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah, and because they have to guess what the actions are. Yeah. So then I got a grant. I think the next thing I did was a short called Suicide Mission.
I really like that one. Yeah. I really like that one.
And then I thought, and that didn't really go anywhere either. But then I thought, oh, maybe I should be doing this. So I just kept making shorts, and then eventually some features too. And yeah.
What was the first one? Was it Your Money or Your Wife?
Yeah.
Or... Oh,
yeah, that was 2015.
How did that idea even come about?
Well, so basically, it's the movie Your Money or Your Wife. It was made as a micro budget through the province used to have this program called First Feature, which was like a micro budget program, and so they had it for 4 years, and we were the last one, and then the provincial agency shut.
What was it called?
It was during the tax credit. The agency or at first it was the Nova Scotia Film Development Corporation, but then it changed its name to Film and Creative Industries Nova Scotia.
Okay.
So. Anyway, the movie's about this guy. His girlfriend dumps him. He goes out. He gets drunk, and then it's cold. It's wintertime, so he breaks into a garage and sleeps there. Wakes up, and then the people in the garage are about to go do a home invasion, and they think he's the guy they met on the internet who's gonna help them, right? So, and it's a farce, and so, but the I don't know if I should say this, but I'm going to. So the way it came from this fact that my brother knew this guy in Pictou County who'd had a few drinks one night and went into this garage. So I guess it's break and enter, right? And slept it off, and then stole a coat from this garage because it was cold. And then he went home and he called my brother. He's like, what do I do with this coat? I don't know. And I just always thought that was like a ridiculous Pictou County story. And I thought it was funny, and I wrote it down. And then it just sort of, I had this idea about like B&Es. Like, I don't know why. Like, I'm very straight-laced and have had a very sheltered life. So I find things like B&Es and cocaine funny, and like they're kind of not. But I have this very kind of sort of, and I think about particularly like, you think about certain British comedies that the farces and so on that were a big influence on me. So anyway, that's where that came from. So that was in 2015.
I really enjoyed that one.
Oh, thanks.
How long did you shoot that for?
That was 14 days, I think.
Oh man, and yeah.
In winter, which I do not recommend.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, but I guess when you shoot in winter, you kind of get people to work on your stuff.
The crews are more available then, so that's certainly helpful. And you can sometimes, they might give you a deal on their rate or that sort of thing. But it had gone pretty well, but I don't recommend winter.
I learned that when making my film 5. Oh. But but the thing again is kind of when it's in winter, you kind of get people to work on your stuff. But if you work in winter, try to just shoot inside as much as possible.
Well, that's the other thing too. The stuff we shot outside, most of the film was in one house inside, but we did shoot some stuff outside, and it looks great. But I just remember standing at the monitor outside thinking, I wish I didn't have to be here. I'm going to lose face, though, if I go in. The crew are already judging me. I can't go inside, and it was so cold.
Oh, God. So now, what are you... Well, I know your current... Well, after that, you made...
You ruined our life.
Yeah. The one with the kid from the future, right?
Yeah.
And then came through and... how did that idea come about?
I was in Glasgow in my 30s walking home one day. I had gone to see a movie and I was walking and I thought, if the 12-year-old version of me could see me right now, he would be so angry because I'm still in this crappy little town and I haven't done anything with my life. And then that made me laugh. And so I wrote it down. And then I thought, what would happen if somebody from the 80s who's 12 somehow ends up now seeing the 40-year-old version of themselves? And it didn't quite turn out the way they wanted, what would happen? So it was originally the idea, I was in England a few years ago and I pitched it as a TV show. And there was like a little bit of interest, but it never really went anywhere. And then I thought, you know, I'd really like to make, after I made Your Money, Your Wife, I thought I want to make another feature, and I think it could be done for no money. So I wrote that script, and we shot it we did it in Indiegogo and raised $5,000 for post, but the shoot itself was $800.
What?
5.5
How
days.
many? Oh, what?
Yeah, we did. You shouldn't brag about this. This is definitely not something you should brag about. But 2 different days, we shot 17 pages.
That's nuts.
Yeah.
Oh, a lot of...
And they were only like 8 or 9 hour days. Yeah.
God damn it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'd never try that.
Yeah, don't do that. Wait for the money. Or find a story. You know, if you want to make a movie that doesn't have conventional coverage, that you know, you don't need lights, or you don't whatever, you could probably do it. But if you're doing it and we had a very small crew, but if you're doing it in kind of a conventional coverage way, it's very challenging.
Oh man, I can't even imagine it. But now your most recent film, the Gaelic film.
Yeah.
Why did you decide to make a film in Gaelic?
Well, I have a Gaelic background. My father's grandparents were all first language Gaelic speakers, and I have a Gaelic name. And so all my life I've had to spell it for people and have people say that's weird or that's different or whatever. And so it's always been something I've been interested in. And over the years I would take lessons every once in a while, and it kind of never went anywhere. And then I was working at AFCOOP on a project called Languages of Nova Scotia, where we facilitated the making of films in different languages, 5 different languages, including Gaelic. And at that time, it was about 2 years ago, I thought, you know, this is a real opportunity for me to try this again. So for 2 years now, I'm still probably a low intermediate, but I've been serious about trying to learn the language, get involved in the community. And so I just wanted to make a film in Gaelic, because that's what I do. I make films. So I had a script in English that was a 3-hander, and I thought could be done fairly easily, because casting's a bit of a challenge. The pool isn't as big to draw on. So I decided, okay, this would be something that's manageable. So we shot it in April. It's called Antinul Espresso, which means the espresso machine, and hopefully it will have a sort of a life in festivals beginning this fall. It's almost done. So.
Oh wow, what's left?
Well, a few things like color, music, and then the mix. So it's the picture's locked.
Oh, okay.
I did the subtitles and everything. So yeah.
Oh man,
that's not fun.
Yeah, yeah. How long is it?
It's 15 minutes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Which I wish it was a little shorter, but I'm pretty happy with it. And I don't think there's a lot of fat in it. So and then I want to do another Gaelic short maybe this fall.
Oh.
And then I'm writing a couple other things that hopefully will be, I'd eventually like to do a Gaelic feature.
So it's all Gaelic from here on out?
No, I'll still do English. I'll still do English. I'm writing a feature called Gen X Forever Bitches. That's in English.
What is that about?
It's about a bunch of people of different generations who keep ending up in the same car. The car keeps getting stolen.
Okay.
Because again, car theft is funny. It's not it's like cocaine.
Okay, I'm gonna end it with this. You love writing and you love telling stories and making films, but what about comedy pulls you to it, especially the style of comedy you make?
Well, it took me a long time. I have a friend in London who said to me, he's like, well, you do farce. That's what you do. And I didn't even I hadn't really thought about it. And then I realized the ITV Jeeves and Wooster series with Stephen Fry and Hugh Laurie from the early 90s was this huge influence on me. And so, yeah, I would say I do farce. And I think what draws me to it is I think the world is this beautiful, crazy, ridiculous place, and you kind of have to laugh, and that's always been my response. And when I was a kid, I could make people, I don't know if I'm funny or not, I think I am, but maybe not. But whenever I would make people laugh, because I think what happens, anybody in comedy basically doesn't like themselves. And so if you can make people, just like if you can make somebody laugh, you think, oh, maybe I'm not garbage, right? So I think that's, for me, where it comes from. And it's just fun. It's like when you make a movie and it's in a theater and people are laughing, that is such an amazing feeling. And so, yeah, not everything I write is comedy, like November 1946. Definitely not comedy. But that tends to be what I've mostly done. And I find the world is so, and you kind of have to laugh or you're going to cry. Like, the world is really messed up. It probably always has been, but never to the degree it is now, particularly with climate change and so on. Yeah. The rise of fascism. And again, and so I'm not saying that is anything more than a coping mechanism, but it is a coping mechanism. And so I think that's where it kind of comes from.
Wow. And I think I'm asking because it's super difficult to write comedy. So yeah,
not for me.
Exactly. So I'll definitely have to have you come back to the podcast because I didn't even get to talk about football.
No, we need to have a West Ham episode. Yeah.
Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
This is the Blackout Podcast.
Thanks for listening.